It's 23 minutes to 9, and sufferers from Lyme disease can wait years for the right diagnosis, which makes treatment much harder. Research published by the British Medical Journal suggests that cases of the infection may be 3 times higher than is currently believed. It's passed on through being bitten by an infected tick, and that's what happened to Rachel Alban when she was a student back in 2010. She's been telling me about her long wait for the correct diagnosis.
The tricky thing about Lyme, once it's past the initial stage, is that symptoms come and go, and a lot of the time you can attribute these symptoms to other things. So I was getting severe fatigue, but I thought, well, I'm just tired because, university's tiring, and I got muscle pains, but I could go and explain those, and I got headaches, I had poor sleep, and each individual thing I could attribute to something else, and it was difficult to see the whole picture until I was really quite ill and quite disabled. And by the end of university, I was struggling just to sit up at a desk for more than 20 minutes at a time.
But you did manage, didn't you, to get a job in publishing?
I did. So I worked in publishing for about 6 months, but I just found that I wasn't coping, and that was really upsetting and disorienting because that wasn't kind of like me, but I didn't know what was wrong. And at that point I went to see the doctor, and we thought maybe celiac disease was the issue, but that turned out also to be a red herring. And so I decided to go back and do an MA, and it was really during that time that my illness became so bad. I was almost bedridden. I had to move home. There were some days where I just couldn't get up to get myself a glass of water. My then boyfriend was having to move me around in a wheelchair when I wanted to go out anywhere. So at that point, I had to move home so my parents could take care of me. And we really tried really hard through the NHS to find a diagnosis.
That must have been, frustrating just doesn't really seem like the right word, but to be so ill and still not know what was wrong with you.
It was quite scary, to be honest, and caused a lot of kind of self-doubt. When tests came back seeming as though nothing was wrong, I was sort of doubting myself, am I making all of this up? Eventually, we heard about Lyme disease through one of the kind of awareness campaigns and thought, okay, well, this really does match with all my symptoms. But we were devastated when the 2 standard NHS tests that you're given, and they came back negative. And now I understand that because I've been ill for such a long time, they were highly likely to come back negative. And so, fortunately, my family kept supporting me, and we wrote to a specialist in Germany and said, look, these are my symptoms. Do you think it could be Lyme? And she said, well, get these tests done. And those tests did show that I had an infection. And from that point on, at least we knew what it was and we could start getting treatment.
But how many years after that initial bite by a tick did you get that diagnosis?
4.5 years. And the really damaging thing is that by that point, the disease has spread all over your body. And in fact, it's crossed the blood-brain barrier. So I was also getting cognitive symptoms. So I was suffering from memory loss and brain fog and depression and anxiety.
And what kind of treatment was available for you once you got the diagnosis?
Well, the diagnosis wasn't recognised in the UK because it was done through German tests. And so actually I got treated by a German doctor and also in America. And the treatment is basically intensive courses of antibiotics and also some anti-malarials and antivirals. And that treatment was really hard, actually. I suffered a lot with nausea from the treatment, but it did make a massive difference. And so by 2016, I was well enough to walk down the aisle and get married. And I'm now at a stage where I can live a fairly normalish life most of the time. It's very limited. I have to be very careful about my energy, and there are times where the illness resurfaces and pulls me back down again for a bit. But the treatment has made an enormous difference from basically no life at all to having some life again. But the really sad thing is that, catching Lyme disease at such a late stage, there are some long-lasting damage.
That was Rachel Alban talking to me about her experience of Lyme disease.